Going to have another go at doing some reverse applique with the circle theme today. So we're going to have a go with using some strips of fabric, which we're going to set behind a circular aperture. Last time we did it where we've got a lining almost to create this clean edge there to place over the top of our reverse applique. We'll try just another method today when we've finished having a go with our strips. So what I've done is I've cut a selection of strips. I am just going to add another colour in there. So I've got the cream calico and some blue linen, and I'm just going to cut a little bit of gingham as well into strips. The idea is we're cutting between sort of anywhere between sort of 2 and 4 centimetres. We're going to just press those in half. And then what we will be doing is attaching those down on top of each other so that the raw edges won't be seen. And then they've still got a little bit of a 3D element to them. But to start with, we just need to prep our. So I've cut some of my denim there as well into these strips, and I've just pressed them all in half, wrong sides together. So if it has got a right and a wrong side, that's facing out. And what we can play around with now is on my backing piece of cloth, I am going to start laying these down, which what can work quite nicely is if you sort of don't do them entirely straight. You're welcome to do them straight, but you can always sort of play around with the angles. The only thing you don't want to do is do it so far off that you can then see a raw edge. When we sort of overlap them, you want it to cover. This is just, we've not stitched it down yet, but you want it to cover where the raw edge of the top is there. So we just play around to start with there of layering those up. So, and then the idea is when we place another piece circle on the top at the end, it will crop all of these behind there. So the way that we begin sewing is I would place this one on here. Obviously, if I am placing a circle over the top, depending on the side, you are going to crop away some of the strips anyway. So you don't have to place it sort of right down at the bottom. We can sort of, even if there's a little bit of the background cloth going, that doesn't matter too much. But what we'll do is treat them at one at a time. So I'll place this on and then I do a running stitch. Well, you're welcome to go onto the machine. Then I'll place another one down that overlaps over that raw edge. Stitch again. Add another one on. Stitch again. And so on. On the Pinterest board, there is also something where they've done this similar technique with a log cabin effect. So the way that that's done, and it's referred to as Manx patchwork, which I hadn't heard before, is the same as with log cabin patchwork. What you can do is just cut a raw edge square to start with and always tack around there. And then what we do is with these folds, sort of start working around that. So I'd have the folded edge in, stitch here, trim that off, add another one overlapping, trim, stitch here, trim it off. So what you're actually getting is the folds are showing. So it's not that sort of way where you sew and flip as you normally do with log cabin patchwork. With this, we're sort of laying the folds over the last raw edge, stitching it down, and then continuing round, which you just then carry on doing. So each row would cover the last outside raw edge there. As you can see, it's just got a little bit more lift than normal log cabin patchwork. But for today, I'm just going to go for the straight strips and sewing those on. So I've just hand stitched there with some running with a running stitch that first strip down there. And I'm going to get another piece here now of my gingham. What's quite nice is to vary the depths of the strips as well. Like I said, you can change the angle, but don't sort of allow the background to show. So I'll add another one there, and so with the running stitch, the calico, and then carry on until I get nearly up to the top. Obviously, you don't need to go right up to the top because we will be creating a sort of turn through circle, which will cover some of the top area. So I've sewn the others there on now. I actually, to speed things up, just sewed those on the sewing machine there. So they're all sort of sewn on and then overlapped there, the strip above. So depending on now, when I'm going to cut out a circle to lay over the top, if I find any of the top raw edges sewing, before I attach this top layer, I can just add on another one if I feel I need to before I add on this next bit. So that's sewing on the different coloured strips there. So as an alternative to this way we did on the last session, I'm going to use a template, just cut out a circle, and I'm going to actually use a piece of this Sashiko fabric here. I used one of my circular templates. Again, if I draw around here, the outside edge this way, this won't be the line that will be stitched and turned under. That I'll have to then sort of cut away up to that line. So I'm actually going to just draw around the inner circle and the outer circle. Shows up enough here, so I want to just get that central there. I sew around the inside and out of the circle there. What I'm going to do is cut out this inner circle, then notch out by about 1 centimetre, so I've got enough raw edge to turn under. I've taken that inner circle out, so I'll be able to use that on another piece again. So because I've used this here, which is mainly used for patchworking these sort of circles with the seam allowance, thinking it is actually quite a deep seam allowance to cut away. So what you can always do is if you just draw around the circle that you've just cut away by about 1/2 centimetre there, and then what I can do is cut some notches, little snips, every 3/4 centimetre or so, all the way around my circle. Like I said, you can just sort of draw on that 1/2 centimetre seam allowance. Now I've snipped the notches, I can flip it over and now just start pressing, just careful with your fingers, these raw edges through to the back there. Just take your time as you go round, all the way round, and press those raw edges onto. So that's all pressed under. So now I'm able to lay that over the top of those stripped applique we have just done. I'll cut it all down to the right size of square. I actually sort of went a little bit larger there, so I'll just neaten that off, and then you can machine stitch around here or do a nice hand running stitch or a blanket stitch. If you prefer this technique here, you could always create another one of those. The good thing with this is you could just sew it around the outside edges because it's all neatly turned underneath, and that these raw edges here aren't going to turn back through. You may prefer to sort of create another one of these. It's just nice to try both the ways there. Here I've already cut it to square the edges off there. there and decided to use some Sashiko thread there and just doing a small running stitch all the way around to hold under that raw edge. So I've finished sewing around the edge now of the circle with that running stitch. Because of the layers of fabric underneath, it's left quite a nice quilted quality to it there. So it's almost helping these strips sort of pop out a little bit more. So that's our strip reverse applique completed there.